All right, I want to take a minute here to sort of explain how commenting features work and how you should respond to my comments. And I feel like this will be helpful if we look at an example here. So I brought up an example of a research paper that was done for me previously, and I want to go over some of the ways in which my comments work and how you should approach and understand them. So first things off, when I open up a paper, and before any of these things appear, I go to the review section and I typically turn on track changes, which allows me to do things such as this right here, where you notice I have changed something instead of has. I've deleted the S and I put the VE. Anytime you see that and you see these little lines out to the side, that means that I've altered something somewhere along the line, usually adding something with track changes, or I create these using the commenting feature. So let's look at this and just sort of look at this. First of all, these lines along the side here, when they appear, that usually is an indication that something has been altered within this framework and it's meant to draw your attention, okay? So that's what those are when they appear. And if you sort of cite through here, I want to point out some of the commenting features I've made. Now this right here, this space after 0 point, that means I've changed something within the layout, okay? That means that there was some after spacing on, probably somewhere here in the paragraph section, there was probably some sort of after spacing here. That means I've removed it. All you'd have to do is either right click, or if there's a sample where you get the X, this means I accept the change. So if I were to want to remove this so that, you want to keep this feature. So to remove this, what you would do is I would simply hit this right here and it accepts it. And in fact, it highlights and shows me that I did this throughout the entire document. Once I've accepted that, it's good. Now here's another example, and sometimes you won't have the check mark. Sometimes you'll have examples where it may have you may have to right click it and accept change, or sometimes you may have to go over here and click on this, the line. Sometimes it actually will give you the option to do it there depending on your word processor. But let's scroll down and look at a little bit of the comments. So we'll go ahead and change. We'll accept this one here too. Okay. Now this doesn't mean it's completely changed. You see, I've accepted the change. I've accepted the note. But I do need to go ahead and probably, sometimes it's difficult, but you can actually remove these. You should be allowed to accept them and keep them. Or if you wanted to, you could just type there and remove it that way. Okay? Little ways so that you will actually end up basically creating a clean copy. So let's go down here. This is where I would have been looking for the thesis statement. And so I looked at the thesis statement, and my comment here was needed for what? A bit more direct. What I meant by this is regulations are desperately needed. I was missing a what. I wanted something very specific, very direct. So I was asking for clarification there. Okay, and that's where the be more direct. So obviously I was pointing out where I wanted to see some improvements in the thesis. As I went down, I started noticing providing of information, and I say something like, could you cite a source to show us this? So I'm asking for things to ideally help promote, ethos. And typically for comments, all I'd have to do once I've done that is I could do that and that once I've made the needed corrections to clean up the copy. Again, I see information, but I don't see a citation, so I'm looking for some sort of confirmation here. Here I've actually removed a hash that was unneeded. So I could remove that and then do that and simply remove it. This one, if I accepted the comment, again, once I've made the changes. Now, see, here's a citation. I was looking for that earlier on. As we scroll down here, I just see a use of third person where there's not talking about experience, so I ask the person to stick to third person. So ideally, they would have made that change later in the paper. Here, I actually make a note about how to properly format in-text citations. I say close quotation with no punctuation, cite, and then punctuate, and I've corrected it here. So if I remove this quotation, back this up, do that, and I can accept this, because this is how it should look. It should end the quotation, give the citation, and then the punctuation, indicating to us that the punctuation helps us remember that this citation right here belongs with this quotation. We don't want the separation that would have been created by punctuation. Here's an example where we have the internet being a proper noun, and I've corrected that. If you want to remove that line, I can simply type it like that. Here's an example where I have put dashes where they needed to be. So I can model myself off this one, doing this, removing that, and I've corrected it. Again, another example of the hash where it rear-ended required a hash in between, a dash, my apologies. So these are ways I can go about correcting this. Also, ideally throughout, you'll notice here that we only have one space after punctuation, so I probably would have corrected that as well. Here's an example where I've corrected spacing with the need. And so what I would do is I would go through here and making sure that, you know, citations, I'm not just removing this information, this should be by you corrected. Citations for this information should be included. This is a fragment, which means the sentence needs to be corrected. Like to see a clearer counter argument, so I'm asking them to clarify a section of the essay there, ultimately reaching the end. And then I made corrections to works cited page, removing this and showing them the model. Now, once they've gone through and accepted all these things and changed everything to provide me with the information, this whole tan bar here should be gone. If it's still there, that means that there's somewhere along here, there's some sort of track change or some sort of comment feature that was not corrected that needed to, like right here where there's a comma that's been removed. So if I've removed all these and changed all these to meet their proper association the way that they should be after I've made the corrections with the feedback from the instructor, this whole bar here should be gone, and ideally I've made adjustments. So I've added more to clarify the counter argument, I've added more citations where all those things were added to. That is the purpose and feature of these comments, okay? Now in order to access these comments, say for example, let's say you had a Gmail account. I'll go into one of mine here. Oops. No, that's not what I wanted. I just want to go access my mail. All right. I apologize for this. I'm being very disruptive here. There we go, Gmail. So let's say I go into Gmail, and let's say there's a document here. Okay, let's say I'll take this one here. There are two ways oftentimes, downloading and viewing. So if I open it like this, it lets me view it. But if I do this with, say, a paper with comments I send back to you, you will not be able to see my comments. You need to actually download the document. So if it was a Microsoft Word document, you need to download it and then open it in Microsoft Word like this on your computer in order to see these comments. If you don't do that, you will not be able to see my comments. So that's another thing you need to make sure. And then once you've made all the corrections, you should have no lines over here, you should have no brown bar. Make sure you check all that and make sure that you've actually addressed the comment features that I've done. So typically when you receive a paper from me back by email, you would download it, open it up in the Microsoft Word or whatever format so that you can then see the comments. Make sure that you then address the comments, and once you've done so, revise again. Read over the paper again, make sure it's the way you want it, and then make sure that this bar and any lines along the sides here, such as these right here, are gone. And then you have a clean copy with no corrections, but like the way you had it when you originally typed it up. And then you have what we call a polished copy that you can then resubmit for a final grade.